As you know, I have been across the Gulf that you call Persian and they call Arabian.
Why do you call it Gulf? You have been to school, or haven't you?
Yes.
What was the name that you have read during your school days?
Persian Gulf.
All right.
But they do call it Arabian Gulf.
Well, they can do many things.
Hey there, and welcome to Watch Cozy. Before we start, if you enjoy what we do, please think about subscribing to the channel. We put a lot of effort into researching and putting these stories together for you. Today, we're looking at a really pivotal moment in the 20th century. The 1979 Iranian Revolution, and specifically the fall of the last Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi.
Yeah, it's a fascinating and complex story. A huge shift in power with, well, consequences we still see today globally.
Absolutely. We've got some great info lined up. We want to unpack the key events, the main players, and, the deeper tensions that were bubbling away.
We'll be looking at the Shah's big modernization push, his vision for Iran.
And then the rise of Ayatollah Khomeini, who became his major opponent.
Right, this fundamental clash between tradition and really rapid change.
Prepare for some maybe surprising details as we go through this period.
Okay, so where should we start? How about the Shah's actual ascent?
Good idea. So it's September 1941. World War II is raging. Mohammad Reza Pahlavi becomes Shah. He's super young, right? Only 21?
Yeah, just 21. And his father, Reza Shah, he was seen as being a bit too close to Nazi Germany.
Which the Allies weren't happy about.
Not at all. They basically pressured him to abdicate in favor of his son.
And you have to remember Iran's position geographically.
Oh, absolutely vital. For the Allies, it was this crucial land bridge to get supplies, war materials, up to the Soviet Union.
So the Allies needed Iran to be stable and, well, cooperative.
Definitely. And the young Shah himself, his background was quite westernized in a way.
He went to school in Switzerland.
That's right, an elite boarding school. And his father arranged his marriage to Princess Fazia of Egypt. It was all about shoring up the Pahlavi dynasty.
What was the initial feeling about him in Iran?
Apparently, the public perception was that he was rather restrained, maybe not as forceful as his father.
Which maybe seemed like a good thing initially.
Perhaps. He certainly seemed keen on modernizing Iran like his father. But he also seemed to want to avoid the constant headbutting his father had with the clergy. He was trying for a slightly different path, it seems.
Okay, so that's the Shah. Now, let's bring in the other key figure, Ayatollah Khomeini.
Ruhollah Khomeini, born back in 1902 in a town called Khomein. And something really significant happened very early in his life.
His father?
Yes, his father was murdered when Khomeini was just an infant.
Wow. And did that shape his views?
It seems so. Reports suggest he actually held Reza Shah, the Shah's father, responsible for it somehow. That kind of early trauma, it sticks with you.
And he pursued a religious path.
Very much so. He became a highly respected scholar, specializing in Islamic law, educated in Khomein, the holy city.
And he was already opposing the Pahlavi regime even before the son took over?
He was, yes. He particularly objected to Reza Shah's reforms, like the ban on the chador, the traditional veil.
That was seen as an attack on religious identity.
Exactly. A direct assault on core Islamic principles in his view.
But he wasn't a major public figure at this point.
Not really, no. In those early years, he was more focused on teaching and developing his ideas, thinking about how Iran could become a truly Islamic state, based mainly in Qom.
Okay, so we have these two figures. Now, the Shah gets serious about his own modernization plans.
Right. And he definitely leans towards the West. A very close relationship develops with the United States.
Which served both sides, presumably.
You could say that.
Yeah.
The U.S. wanted reliable access to Iranian oil, stability in the region.
And the Shah needed American support, maybe technology, funding for his big projects.
Precisely. And that leads us to 1963 and the White Revolution.
This was his signature program, wasn't it?
It really was. A package of, well, pretty ambitious reforms.
Yeah.
Land redistribution, selling off state industries, literacy campaigns.
And giving women the right to vote.
Yes, women's suffrage was part of it, although it's a bit of an irony.
What's that?
Well, women got the right to vote, but they weren't actually allowed to vote in the referendum that approved the White Revolution itself.
Huh. That's complicated. Shows the tensions already present, maybe.
It does suggest some contradictions, yeah. And unsurprisingly, these reforms faced huge pushback.
From the clergy?
Primarily, yes. They hated the land reform. It threatened the vast lands held by religious trusts. And they saw the increased role for women as, un-Islamic part of a westernizing agenda eroding their values.
And this is where Khomeini steps into the spotlight more.
Absolutely. He became a very vocal opponent. He started openly denouncing the Shah, talking about government corruption, the brutality of Savak.
So that's the secret police.
That's right. Known for harsh methods. Khomeini condemned the state violence, called the Shah a tyrant.
And that led to?
It led to crackdowns, protests erupted, particularly in Qom. There was bloodshed, and eventually Khomeini was forced into exile. First to Turkey, then to Najaf in Iraq.
So the battle lines are really being drawn now.
Clearly. Meanwhile, the Shah's projecting this image of, well, imperial grandeur.
Like the coronation in '67.
Exactly. He crowns himself Emperor Shah, King of Kings. And, quite significantly, he also crowns his wife, Farah, as empress. That was a first in Persian history.
Sending a message about modernity and the role of women, perhaps? Or just power?
Probably a bit of both. Then came that incredible party in Persepolis in 1971.
Ah, yes, the 2,500-year anniversary of the Persian Empire.
It's hugely expensive, incredibly lavish. Heads of state from all over the world were there.
But not many ordinary Iranians.
It was very exclusive. And some argue it really backfired. It looked extravagant and disconnected from people's lives, possibly fueling resentment.
Well, at the same time, he's pouring money into development.
Massive investments, yeah. Technology, building industries, infrastructure, even pushing for nuclear energy. His vision was for Iran to be a top-tier modern nation.
But did that create its own problems, this rapid change?
It definitely created a cultural rift. You had the elite in Tehran becoming very westernized, adopting Western clothes, music, lifestyles.
While much of the country remained deeply traditional.
Exactly. A growing gap between those two worlds. And a feeling among many that their values were being ignored or trampled on.
And politically, how is opposition handled?
With an iron fist, basically. Savak became increasingly powerful and feared.
So arrests, torture.
Yes, imprisonment, torture, forced exile for critics. It really stifled any kind of open political debate or dissent.
Which, ironically, might have actually helped the clergy.
That's a key point. By crushing secular opposition groups, socialists, nationalists, liberals, the Shah inadvertently left the mosques and the mullahs as one of the few remaining spaces for organized opposition. They had this existing network across the country.
So the pressure's building and building. What was the actual spark?
Many point to January 1978. A defamatory article attacking Khomeini was published in a state-run newspaper.
And that triggered protests.
Big ones, yeah. Started in Qom, the religious center.
Yeah.
And the security forces cracked down hard. People were killed.
And then the cycle began.
Exactly. Because of the Islamic tradition of mourning periods, particularly the 40th day commemoration, Chehelom, each mourning ceremony for those killed turned into a new, often larger protest.
So the protests just kept escalating throughout 1978.
They did, spreading across the country. Then came a really horrifying event in August 78.
The Cinema Rex fire.
Yes, in Abadan. A cinema was deliberately set on fire during a screening, and hundreds of people burned to death. It was horrific.
Who was blamed?
At the time, the opposition immediately pointed the finger at Savak. It caused mass outrage, just unbelievable anger.
Even though later evidence suggested something else.
Yes, later investigations strongly suggested it was actually carried out by Islamist militants who saw cinemas as symbols of Western corruption. But at that moment, everyone believed it was the regime.
A major turning point then.
Absolutely. Public anger reached a new level. You started hearing widespread calls for the Shah's death for the first time.
And the regime's response.
More crackdowns, which led to Black Friday, September 8th, 1978.
What happened?
Martial law had been declared, but huge protests happened anyway in Tehran. The military opened fire on demonstrators in Jela Square. Many, many people were killed.
That must have galvanized the opposition even more.
It did.
Yeah.
It led to a general strike that paralyzed the country. Oil workers walked out, bazaars closed, the economy ground to a halt.
And what was Khomeini doing during all this? He was still in Iraq.
He was, but then Iraq, under pressure from the Shah, expelled him. So he made a really shrewd move.
Going to Paris.
Exactly. To Nohov-le-Château, a village just outside Paris. Suddenly, he was accessible to the world's media.
Became an international figure overnight?
Pretty much. He could get his message out easily via cassette tapes smuggled into Iran, phone calls, and he became the focal point for all the opposition groups. It's interesting, though, his messaging from Paris was quite moderated.
How so?
He talked a lot about freedom and independence, but he was careful not to explicitly lay out his vision for a strict Islamic republic and Islamic theocracy. He kept it broader, appealing to a wider range of people.
Smart politics. Meanwhile, what about the Shah?
He seemed increasingly isolated and, frankly, unwell. We know now he was suffering from cancer, which likely affected his judgment.
Indecisive.
Very much so, it seems. He vacillated between cracking down hard and trying to make concessions, but nothing worked. The momentum was just too strong against him.
And what were the big international powers doing? The U.S., Britain?
This was critical. They basically decided his position was untenable. Key meetings were held, like the one in Guadeloupe in early January '79.
And they decided to withdraw support.
Essentially, yes. They realized the revolution was probably inevitable and maybe it was time to cut their losses. They advised him to leave.
Which he did.
On January 16, 1979, the Shah and Empress Farah boarded a plane and left Iran.
Did they think they'd be back?
Reports suggest they truly believed it was temporary. A regency council was left in place. They thought maybe things would cool down and they could return.
But that wasn't going to happen.
No. Just over 2 weeks later, February 1st, 1979.
Khomeini returns.
A triumphant return after 14 years in exile. Millions of people poured into the streets of Tehran to welcome him. Just incredible scenes.
The support was overwhelming by then.
It seemed universal. People from all walks of life, religious, secular, leftists, nationalists, they all saw him, at that moment, as the leader who had overthrown the Shah. Even many who'd previously backed the Shah switched allegiance.
And the path was clear for the Islamic Republic.
Pretty much. Things moved very quickly after his return. The old regime collapsed, and the Islamic Republic, under Khomeini's ultimate authority, was established.
And the fates of the two main figures.
The Shah died in exile in Cairo, Egypt, the following year, 1980, from his cancer.
And Khomeini.
Ayatollah Khomeini remained the supreme leader of Iran until his death in Tehran in 1989.
Quite the story. When you look back, the 1979 revolution really stands as this powerful example, doesn't it?
It really does. How all these forces, ambitious modernization, a powerful religious backlash, political repression, the Shah's own actions, and shifting international winds, how they all came together.
To cause such a profound transformation.
Yeah, a complete reshaping of a nation. And the clash between these two figures, the Shah and Khomeini, it's just this epic narrative of opposing wills.
With a legacy that, well, it continues to shape not just Iran, but the whole region and world politics even today.
Absolutely. It's one of those historical moments whose echoes are still very loud.
We hope exploring this has given you a clearer picture of what happened during that tumultuous time. Maybe sparked some more questions for you to think about, too. Which parts of this whole story do you find most striking? Something to consider.